Dogman, and the stairs to nowhere. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a weird story for you about a werewolf-like being that I was forced to deal with on the strangest, as in weirdest, camping trip I ever went on. I hadn't actually thought about that trip in decades, but I was reminded of it because of something that happened just last month when I was visiting my family in Pennsylvania back during Thanksgiving week. My great-nephew, we can call Phil, had driven out all the way west from New York, where he's been going to NYU. He was driving on Interstate 80, somewhere around Allenwood or Little Mountain. He had left Manhattan around midnight, and so it was something like 3 or 4 in the morning by the time he got to that location. I-80 over there is an unlit 2-lane highway surrounded by woods. You can safely call it the country. So he said he was driving along, la-di-da, and then suddenly some big, dark ball came rolling out of the forest and out onto the road, right out onto the highway in front of him. He said it must have been 6-7 feet, this ball rolling down out of the woods. It was far enough in front of him that he was able to pull off to the side of the road and stop there as the ball unfolded itself, and he could see something that his brain couldn't at first make any sense out of. According to Phil, he saw 2 really big, really hairy, and really naked dudes fighting like lunatics in front of him on the highway. They seemed to be wearing dog or wolf masks, and he said his entire body froze. They must be insane people or Satanists, he thought, and they were so athletic that their fighting was wilder than fighting you see in big-budget action flicks. Phil is a pretty devoted Christian for someone attending NYU, and he told us that he felt a deep need to get out of there before he lost his immortal soul. Driving on the grass on the right side of the highway, Phil said he watched the 2 devils battle. They each must have been over 6 feet tall, at least, and they must have been wearing ape suits or monster cosplay outfits because they were entirely covered in fur. The suits were so sheer and so tight that he could see muscle movement under the hair. In fact, the costumes looked so real that he almost thought he was seeing real actual werewolves, men with dog heads, battling just a few feet to his side. Why did you think they weren't real? I asked, and the entire family rolled their eyes at my question. I got informed in surround sound that werewolves don't exist because science and whatnot. Phil asked me what I meant, because in all honesty, he admitted that the only reason he didn't think it was a real battle between real werewolves is that real werewolves aren't real. They don't exist, was shouted from multiple mouths at once. The family was getting surly. I had wanted them to be more open to Phil's story, but instead, I was causing them to think that both he and I were crazy. So I invoked boomer privilege, and I told them that I wanted to share with them a story of my own. Again, eye rolls and deep sighs. Here we go, said someone who shall remain nameless. Now I'll tell you the story of why I think Phil saw a real Dogman on I-80 that night last month in Pennsylvania, same as I told them, and I hope you're in the mood for it. At least more than my own family was. This story goes back a long, long ways to my teenage years when I took a year off between high school and college to figure out if I really even wanted to go to college. This was the early 1970s, 1972 to be precise, and back then, this was called finding yourself. I wasn't alone. My 2 other best friends from high school were joining me, and when people asked why we weren't either studying or working, we tell them that we were finding ourselves, or that we were on a voyage of self-discovery. People called us the Three Stooges as a result, and looking back, I can't blame them. So let's call me Shemp, because I had long, messy hair. Let's call our serious friend Mo, and let's call our light-hearted friend Curly. We weren't brothers by blood, but we were blood brothers. There were parts of our wanderings that were pre-planned, like catching Led Zeppelin in North Carolina in the beginning of June. But Most of it was random and unplanned. The stuff I'm about to tell you about happened in a very unplanned way. We were hiking through a forest in the Midwest in some intense heat. This would have been well into August, later in that month, and we had made it as far as Indiana. I think we were in the Hoosier National Forest, but don't quote me on that. I remember it was forested, and I remember getting fresh water from natural creeks and rivers as often as we got it from public faucets and fountains. We came across something that seemed incredibly strange to the three of us in the middle of the Indiana woods. There was a wooden staircase leading up, and then just stopping. Curly said this was a sign and that we should camp there, in front of those stairs. Mo and I were creeped out by the inexplicable sight, but we also felt it was time to get a camp set up for that night, so we agreed to camp near there. We went on the other side of some trees to set up our tents, because neither Mo nor I wanted to have to look up and see that thing. For the rest of the day and night, Curly kept proposing different explanations for how the staircase got there in the middle of nowhere, and then Mo or I would point out why that theory didn't hold water. So as the day wore on into night, Curly's theories got wilder and wilder. After all, he reminded us, the staircase was really there, so that meant there had to be some story of its origin that did hold water. At least he was trying to figure it out, while Mo and I were honestly too frightened of it to think about it too deeply. After we went to sleep, I was awakened by the sound of someone walking up and down that wooden staircase. At least that was what it sounded like. I could hear the wooden boards creaking as someone walked up to the top, and then silence. Someone would walk down the stairs and then more silence. Sometimes it sounded like someone wearing shoes. Sometimes it sounded like a barefoot person. I grew increasingly annoyed as I assumed it was Curly playing games, or maybe he was running up and down the stairs to try to solve the mystery of their presence. I wanted to leave my tent and shout at him to quit it, but I felt safer inside my tent than out in the night with those creepy stairs over there. One time, I thought I heard dog's nails on wood as a canine seemed to be climbing the stairs, and I wondered to myself, well, how did Curly do that? Then I heard Curly's voice outside, calling to me and Mo in a hushed tone, asking us to go outside with him. I got shivers all over. That was the only night of my life where I felt like I was in a horror movie. I actually wondered if that was really Curly, or some evil witch imitating his voice to get me outside for a surprise attack. I unzipped the tent just enough for me to peek out and see Curly clearly, and then I felt foolish about my paranoia, and I came outside. Curly told us both that he was seeing what he called ghosts and monsters going up and down that staircase. He said the ones that went up disappeared at the top. Mo accused him of pranking us, and I looked at him closely to see if he was tripping. We were not against psychedelics, but we had agreed before hitting the road that none of us would trip until we had decided that our voyage of discovery was over. We felt that nature was a big enough trip by itself, and we better stay aware of consensus reality while in the wild in order to survive until the end of it. So I'm sure we were all sober that night, even though it was 1972 and we were 18 years old. It took Curly some bit of whispering to convince the two of us that he really was on the level, and then once we believed he was telling us his version of the truth, Mo and I looked at each other, both hoping the other one would say something brilliant to make sense out of this insanity. If Curly was being honest, then that meant that there were ghosts and monsters walking up and down the staircase just on the other side of those trees. I remember shivering, and although it was night, this was a hot August night in Indiana. It wasn't autumn or winter. Have you ever been sweating and shivering at the same time? because that's what I felt like on that night. Mo seemed to decide that he needed to be the leader, so he suggested we all go look together at the stairs and see what we saw. He was trying to sound all brave about it, but his voice got kinda quavery while saying what he said. I think he was hoping we'd say no and go back to bed, and I probably actually did say no, but eventually we agreed we'd hide behind some bushes and peek out at the staircase. Mo and I decided we wanted to remain hidden, just in case there really were monsters or ghosts over there. As we took up our position in the weeds, as it were, I thought I saw something walking past us, as though it had just come down that staircase. It might have been an optical illusion, but I was too scared to stick my neck out, in a literal fashion, to see what it had been, if anything. After that, we sat there for some time with nothing at all going on, and Mo started to become fidgety. He wanted to go back to camp, and he said so. I concurred, and Curly grew unhappy with both of us. As we got up to leave, he burst through the foliage to look up at the staircase. "There," he shouted, "right there, look you guys, it's a monster." Mo and I looked at each other, and I have to admit, I became overwhelmed with curiosity. Our cover was blown anyway, may as well see what Curly was talking about. So I joined him on the other side of the underbrush, soon to be followed by Mo. We all looked up the staircase, and there, at the very top of those stairs, was what looked like an actual, genuine monster. It wasn't moving at first. It was just standing there, but it had glowing eyes, and it had pointed ears like a wolf on top of its head. I wondered if this was a dummy made up to look like some kind of monster. I remember walking left and right because I wanted to get a different view, but I was afraid to walk any closer to it. We had once gone to a haunted castle ride together back on the beach somewhere in New Jersey, and I wondered if this was something like that, which Curly had cooked up to scare me and Mo. But Curly couldn't have carried a werewolf dummy with him as we hiked, and it's not something he could have built out of materials at hand in the forest. If he had an accomplice, how could that person have even known where we would be on that night? This was 1972. We didn't have GPS. I wondered if maybe the staircase itself was the landmark that he and his fellow prankster or pranksters had agreed to meet at, but that would sort of imply that they had built the staircase to nowhere themselves. One or more of them would have had to have been master carpenters, and Curly would have had to keep his friendship with a master carpenter secret from the rest of us. Curly was not good at keeping secrets. That's why I'm calling him Curly in this story. He was very WYSIWYG, if you know what I mean. He always said every single thought he was thinking out loud. So if Curly hadn't put that werewolf dummy up on the top step of those stairs, looking like his glowing eyes were staring down at the rest of us, then who had? And then that dummy started moving, and I realized I was the one who was a dummy. That was either someone in a monster costume, or else that was a monster. Mo got angry at that moment, just like Mo from the Three Stooges probably would have. He started ordering the guy on top of the stairs to come down at once and stop this hoax. I remember he challenged the guy's manhood, like, "If you're so tough, come down here and let us get a better look at you," or something like that. Well, I don't think Mo was prepared for that guy up there to accept his challenge, but either he understood English, or else he just didn't like Mo's tone, because he dropped to all fours and ran down those stairs quickly. He looked so natural on all fours that all ideas of that being a human in a costume disappeared. The Dogman ran down the steps as Mo ran back toward camp. Curly ran directly away from camp, and I stupidly or unluckily chose to run in the same direction that the Dogman was running in. So while my buddies were now in relative safety, I had a giant man with a dog head hot on my tail. I ran as fast as I'm ever going to run. I was never so desperate in my life. I knew that creature was unnatural, and it was going to tear me apart, so I ran faster than I should have been able to. Still, I knew he would catch up to me in seconds, and I knew I was about to feel some very intense pain. Each time the monster touched ground, he landed so hard that the ground bounced underneath my feet. That thing had to be bigger than 6 feet tall, as it seemed to weigh a metric ton. And then, suddenly, I didn't feel it running behind me any longer. I kept going for a while out of sheer terror, but when I eventually looked back, I didn't see the animal any longer. I didn't know what to do at that point, and I was shaking all over, jangling with nerves. I wanted to keep running, but I also wanted to get back with my friends. Safety in numbers and all that. I was afraid to walk back toward that staircase, but my problem deciding what to do was solved for me when Mo and Curly burst out of the bushes on either side, excited and asking each other if they had seen the same thing. I hadn't seen anything, so I asked them what happened. They both agreed that the Dogman had been chasing me, and then it just sort of phased out of existence. I remember they used the word phased, which I interpreted them as meaning disappeared, as in the transporter room in the old Star Trek TV series. You've probably seen some version of that, so you know how the characters fade out in one location and then fade in another. I asked them if it had twinkly little lights in its belly like Captain Kirk did on TV, and they just looked at me. According to what I remember them telling me, the creature didn't blink out of existence, but it faded into invisibility over the course of one bounding leap. It was maybe 5 seconds from leaping on top of me, but it faded out by the 3rd or 4th second. If I had run even a little bit more slowly, I wonder how that might have changed history. Would I have been ended there on that spot, or would the creature have moved through me like a ghost? I lean toward the result in which I get clobbered, because of the heavy weight that animal seemed to be pounding into the ground each time any of its feet touched down. I think it was real, very physically real, and then I think it faded back into wherever it came from. Now you would think that would have been enough excitement for one evening for us, but we were still very young, and at that point, we were far too wired to even think about sleeping. Mo wanted to know what the heck was on top of that staircase, and he wanted Curly to go up and check. I also was curious, but not curious enough to even touch that staircase, let alone climb it. I normally didn't join in when Mo got like this, but we both dared Curly to go to the top, saying we bet he didn't have the courage. It was unfair to use brains against Curly, as he was defenseless in that department, but I wanted to know, and I didn't want to go look for myself. You can decide for yourself if this act was brave or foolhardy, but Curly slowly, tentatively, nervously placed his foot on the bottom step of that staircase and then stood still. "What are you waiting for, you moron?" asked Mo politely, and Curly said he was waiting to see if anything bad happened before taking a second step. I could fully appreciate that. I would have done the same thing if I were dumb enough to be Curly. A second step was also survived, so he took a third and a fourth. Soon our Curly was only 2 or 3 steps from the top, and Mo was asking him, "What's up there? What's up there?" Curly told him to calm down, he was almost there. And then both Mo and I screamed. The Dogman, the werewolf, whatever you want to call it, that thing was suddenly standing there on the top step, looking down at Curly. I didn't see it step from anywhere to get there. I didn't see it fade in. I just saw it suddenly, as though it had blinked into existence. It had the same glowing eyes, and the same pointed wolf ears, and the same dog head, over the same hairy or furry humanoid body. I noticed for the first time that it had the hind legs of a canine, which explained better how it was able to run so naturally on all fours. I never thought that this was another creature of the same species. I felt at the time, and still feel today, that we were seeing the same creature return. Well, whatever it was, our screams alerted Curly's attention to it, and he tried to turn around and race back down the staircase. His feet got tangled, and he came down pretty hard, hurting an ankle in the process. The Dogman seemed to have disappeared again, so Mo and I went to work creating a makeshift splint out of sticks and a torn t-shirt, then set about supporting our friend as we walked him toward a commercial campsite we had passed on the way in. We got him first aid there and pooled some money to rent a cabin to give Curly time to recover. He was limping along with us within a week, which was basically all we could afford at the time in terms of cabin rental. So, back to 2021, I don't remember if anyone in the family was still listening all the way to the end of my story, other than Phil, who hung on my every word. Now, all of our straight-laced conformist family members think we're both bonkers. Phil's parents said something like, "Insanity skips a generation," which I thought, and still think, was a terrible thing to say about their own son. I'm old enough that I no longer care how crazy people think I am, but I'd hate for Phil to lose credibility at such a young age. I warned him to be careful about who he tells his story to. I reminded him I hadn't talked about what happened to me for years, as I was building my career and having my family. It might be wise for him to show the same caution. I say this even though his story is nowhere near as crazy as my tale of the night my friends and I saw Dogman and the stairs to nowhere. In the old days, people used to celebrate Christmas with scary stories. That's why this year, we're bringing you the 12 Days of Dogman. From Monday, December 13th through Christmas Evil, we'll bring you another full episode of Dogman Encounter stories each day. And then, on Christmas Day, we'll make it a baker's dozen. The 12 Days of Dogman, right here on the Scary Stories NYC channel, bringing you scary tidings and Christmas fear. We're so happy with Lost in Thought. Sometimes we do a turkey trot. As executive producer, he's the Sultan of SWAT. He's got that charm that can't be bought. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer, Lost in Thought, for making this episode possible. In exchange, he or she gets all our perks, including our weekly secret uncensored Dogman stories, far too wild to ever run on this channel. Lost in Thought also gets to see advanced sneak previews of episodes and gets to watch our over 21 hours of archived secret uncensored Dogman stories that I should add to as soon as possible. And you can see them too. Just join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or do what Lost in Thought did and click that join link under this and all of our videos. Now here's TV spokesmodel citizen Henry Lee Dogman to fill in the rest of the deets. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined, and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.